My name is Ben Harrow. I was a captain in the Green Berets for 6 years. In 2012, I lost both my legs above the knees when an IED exploded. And this is everything I'm authorized to tell you. There is no other unit in the world that does what the Green Berets do, because Green Berets look at problem sets a little bit differently. And we're always thinking, all right, I can kill person X, but what sort of second and third order effects does that cause? Maybe we should approach them and bring them in and have them work for us. Maybe they can bring us somebody bigger. Nation building is going in and supporting country X. The Green Berets are sent to that country to help become a force multiplier and train up an army, train up a police force, and ensure security in that country. Because from security, there's a lot of trickle-down effects from that. I'd say one of my biggest personal, professional successes, and I'd say my team as well, was our deployment in 2010 to Ruzgan to the Chutu Valley. If you look on the map, is right in between the Helmand and Kandahar province. Up in the Chutu Valley area, it was kind of the heartbeat of the Taliban. The third group team was in the middle of a big clearing operation, and they kind of hit a point of like no man's land, and they couldn't break up into that valley any further. We picked up from that third group team, and at first we tried to push into the valley. We as a team did some thinking, and we realized that to be truly successful in Afghanistan at this juncture, we needed to do something different. And we knew that for us to do that properly, we had to be living and engaged with the villagers every day. So the next go around, instead of us trying to do this big clearing operation over a course of 3 days and just clearing compounds and trying to kill or capture whoever was there and then leaving, what we did was we actually skipped a whole area that we deemed as dangerous, air inserted into one area of a very northern portion of that village, did a river crossing, and then worked with the villagers beforehand that wanted us there. So we actually picked a compound that was like a goat pen and nobody wanted, and said, hey, we're here and we're not going anywhere. We actually picked the compound because we didn't want to look as like we were just taking the nicest compound. And so more locals were willing to work with us. We were able to start to slowly build up a true local security force. The Taliban didn't know what to do because we just totally planted our flag in the middle of a major logistical chain of theirs, and our villagers that were happy to have us there supporting them and literally fighting shoulder to shoulder with them right next to them, doing long-range foot patrols up into the mountains to go conduct ambushes on the Taliban, setting up checkpoints and sitting up on the checkpoints with them for days at a time, which they hadn't experienced before of, hey, these Americans are actually here living with us and eating our food and part of the tribe. It gained their support and that huge rapport, the rapport building, which is so critical for us as SF guys. You're living off the economy. Every night you're eating Afghan chicken or Afghan goat or Afghan sheep and rice. And if you're lucky, maybe there was okra or some like stewed tomatoes and a giant piece of flatbread. We were able to start to slowly recruit Afghans that were like, holy shit, the Americans with beards, they're here. They're not going back to their fire base. We went in there with maybe the promise of 5 Afghans. By the end of that trip, we had a 90-plus man fighting force. The Taliban had destroyed the roads. Well, we hired about 300 villagers to build up their road, leveraging different government agencies, USAID and state and whoever else, and repave this road. And once we had security and we repaved the road, well, now comes in commerce. And all of a sudden we see the bazaar open up again in this village where there was nothing. So it was just interesting to see all the trickle-down effects of once you're able to do the kinetic piece of the operation and kill, capture, and remove whoever off the battlefield that's a bad actor. That's only a small piece of it. And the bigger piece is that nation building piece, or for us at the time, is that kind of the village building piece or the province building piece. But it's the same thing. It's just at a smaller scale. Usually when I'm explaining to people what the Green Berets do and who we are, they have no idea of what we really do, right? And to be honest, that's kind of the allure of it. We are a special operations unit. You don't necessarily want your adversaries knowing who you are and what you do. The motto of the Green Berets is De Oppresso Liber, and it's Latin for to free the oppressed. We're there to help people, and you're there to do good for others, and the selfless service piece, which I love that aspect of it. The Green Berets are known as one of the most elite units in the US military. Originally, it was called the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, which was formed during World War II. I believe in 1952, the OSS split, and it was the CIA and Special Forces. General Donovan, the original commander for the OSS, when people were asking what type of candidate that he was looking for to fill the role that the OSS was set up to conduct during World War II, he said, I'm looking for Princeton graduates that can win bar fights. They just don't fly around in helicopters at night doing cool guy stuff. I see him in the next morning in meetings, meeting with the mayor, meeting with the police chief. At the same time, half the team's out back training up, the national SWAT team that they work with to go do missions. Their intelligence sergeant is constantly walking around and doing meetings with Iraqis and sync meetings with the rest of the conventional forces. So just seeing that they were kind of their own standalone group and they were very effective what they did, I saw that and I was like, I want to go do that. We're sent into regions and parts of the world to either help bring up a country or take down a country. And whenever I'm asked about, what is it that Green Berets do, I always use the comparison that Army Rangers and Navy SEALs, they're kind of like checkers masters because they're the best at what they do. Green Berets are, I think, more of chess masters, and that's not to put one down and say one game is better than the other. There's similarities between the two games. It's just that for us, there's a lot more moves on the board that we're able to do because we work a lot more with government agencies, other nations' governments, other nations' military more closely and combined with them than the other units do. As an officer, there's a lot of gates that you have to pass even before attending selection that enlisted guys don't. One of those being just a on-paper selection process. And I know some of my West Point classmates that applied on paper and then didn't even get invited to attend SFAS, Special Forces Assessment and Selection. I attended SFAS in July of 2008. SFAS had always been anywhere from like 24 to 29 days. And I think they did that just to kind of keep people guessing. So that way you couldn't like game selection. If you went to selection and I went the next month, you couldn't be able to tell me, hey, the first day you're going to do this, the second day you're going to do this to like prep for it. It's not the same course every time, but you're going to do the same stuff every time. When I went, because the global war on terror was hopping at the time, right? In 2008, Afghanistan was heavy. They condensed everything to 14 days to try and produce more Green Berets. When I was starting to train up for SFAS, I did a lot of ruck marching. We'd spend like an hour walking with your rucksack on of like 70 pounds, but you'd also have maybe a telephone pole on top of that, and you're lined up with somebody else that has that same telephone pole, and you walk miles and miles and miles with this telephone pole on your back, or you guys would take turns carrying a telephone pole and with your rucksack on your back, or maybe you'd show up one day and it would be like a 10-mile run. Selection is just a mental and physical like kick in the nuts. I was probably the most in shape I was, ready to go to selection. And by the time I finished selection, I was pretty broken. I remember after finishing the very last portion of selection, which is called the trek, which after everything that you do this anywhere from like 25 to 30 mile road march. You really don't know the exact distance. You're not allowed to wear a watch. You can't have any way to keep track of it with like pace counting. And they just tell you, line up on the cones with the prescribed packing list, which is always around like 80 pounds dry. So then you put the water in there too. So you're probably at like 90 pounds. And then they tell you launch, and they just tell you keep following the chem lights. And so you're just walking and walking and walking and walking. You're so broken mentally, you're so broken physically. So you get like a glimpse at like a person's like true soul and personality. But I ended up walking 8 hours and 20 minutes nonstop, basically. I think my friend and I said that we stopped for like 5 minutes to grab some food. But we knew that you couldn't stop too long because you get too comfortable. You cross the finish line and you're on this gravel and you drop your rucksack and you're in formation. It was so painful. It felt like the bottom of my feet were hit with a baseball bat just over and over and over again, because you can't just stand there. You have to like kind of shift and change feet because your feet are so bruised and they're so blistered up. I remember walking to the showers afterwards, and it was so painful trying to walk around on your feet after walking for almost 9 hours. It's still, even after losing my legs, it's still one of those like fond memories I have of my feet and just how painful it was on my feet. Selection is a huge mind and I went through reverse cycle. So we're doing everything at night. Sometimes they just keep you up because they don't want you allowed to get so much sleep for whatever reason, that's part of selection. So they would do stuff where, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning and you're sitting in this little auditorium and they hand out pieces of paper, you don't know what it is, and they say, all right, flip it over, read the instructions and complete the task. And you flip it over and the instructions are, it's a blank map of the United States. And they say, hey, this is a timed event, fill in as many states in the United States as you can by memory. One of the things that they did one night, they're keeping us up, is they give us the piece of paper, they flip it over, you read it, and it's a scenario. And the scenario is that you're in charge of a special forces patrol in Iraq. Your mission is to go and meet this key leader that no one's been able to meet, but it's very important that you meet him for like mission success. And while you're convoying to the meeting, you see, a woman and child injured on the side of the road. And the question is, what do you do? My reasoning for not stopping is, my mission today is to go and meet this guy. I don't know when I'm going to be able to meet him again. As much as I care for the woman and child, and I understand how important that is, I also don't know if it's a setup. I don't know if it's some sort of trap. So I radio to Hire to let them know the grid coordinate. They can bring an air asset on. They can check out what's going on with maybe a drone, a predator feed. They can send another unit out there to go take care of that. But I know my mission is to go take care of what I was given. So we go outside, we're all kind of waiting for people to finish up. And we're like, hey, how'd you do? What'd you do? What'd you say? And we go around and everyone's like, I stopped. No, of course I stopped. Yeah, of course I stopped. I wanted to show them that I care. Yeah, of course I stopped. They all looked at me and kind of laughed and were like, well, at least you had some reasoning behind it. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what the cadre want to see, especially from the officers, is that whatever course of action you do, you make your decision, you stick with your decision, you have reasoning for your decision. They want somebody that's analytical and always thinking through the problem set. After selection, I went back to my unit, finished up there, and then started the Q course, which was a long pipeline to become a Green Beret. And the Q course stands for the Special Forces Qualification Course. And depending on what your MOS is, or basically what your skill set is on the team, for me, because I was an officer, so I was known as an 18 Alpha. An 18 Bravo is your weapons sergeant, an 18 Charlie is the Special Forces engineer, the 18 Delta is the Special Forces medic, the 18 Echo is the Special Forces communications sergeant, and then you have an 18 Fox, which is the intel sergeant, as well as some other specialties on the team, a team sergeant and a warrant, who's basically the second in command on a Special Forces team. A big portion of what we do that makes us so elite is the cultural and the language training that we do that other units don't receive in practice, where we deploy to another region. A lot of the times we don't take a translator because everyone on the team can speak that language. There's 1st Special Forces Group, 3rd Group, 5th Group, 7th Group, 10th Group, and then 19th and 20th Group. And each active duty group, which is 1st through 10th that I just named, each group has a specific AOR, or area of responsibility, on the globe that they're primarily responsible for. So for example, I was in 7th Special Forces Group, so we were primarily responsible for Central and South America. So what that means that your language during the Q course is either Spanish, some people take Portuguese, but mostly Spanish. You're gonna be going down south to Honduras, El Salvador, Argentina, Chile, wherever the mission takes you. I chose 7th Group as my first choice and Spanish, hoping that way I definitely get 7th Group and go down to Central and South America or Afghanistan and do that mission, because I just did 15 months in Iraq, and I was like, all right, I already got Iraq under my belt. I don't really want to go back to Iraq. I don't want to learn Arabic. When I was going through the Q course, it was just very language intensive, 8 hours a day, nothing but Spanish, working with the teacher, flashcards, the chalkboard, computer programs, watching TV. As the captain, you're expected to speak Spanish. You're expected to be able to stand up in front of a room of commandos in Colombia and be able to talk about what you do or talk about training in Spanish fluently. And I've always been a high performer. So I was listening to a lot of Spanish music. I got big into reggaeton. I got big into bachata. I was watching Mujeres Asesinas on Telemundo. It became my favorite telenovela. It was really whatever I could do to try and absorb the language. The Q course can be anywhere from, a little over a year, like it was for me, because I was a shorter language, and my specialty course was a little bit shorter as an officer. But there's guys that go to first group where they're also in 18 Delta. So not only do they have to learn how to speak Chinese, which is like 6 to 7 months, but you're also going through the Special Forces medical course, which is about a year in itself. So guys will spend like almost 2 years going through the Q course before they get to the team. There's an 85% attrition rate, so 15 to 20% actually make it from entering selection, getting selected, going through the Q course, and then being able to walk across the stage and receive your Green Beret upon graduation. I had a report to 2nd Battalion, 7th Special Forces Group about a week after I graduated, which my wife wasn't too happy about, but such is life as a Green Beret. And took a team right away. Little did I know that I made a very good impression on the 7th Group commander at graduation. They needed team leaders, so it was exciting for me. It's like showing up day one and the New York Yankees, and they said, "Hey, we heard you can play ball. Go take shortstop." And so it was exciting for me. During my time, during the Global War on Terror, or the GWAT, 7th Group and all the other Special Forces groups, besides focusing on their primary AOR, was also given the additional task of the GWAT. So for 7th Group and 3rd Group, primarily, we were headed to Afghanistan. I never had the opportunity to deploy to South America as a team leader in 7th Group. I just kept going back to Afghanistan. All U.S. Special Operations are elite, right? And they do a very good job in their selection process of how they find guys that want to be SEALs and Rangers and Green Berets, and they're willing to endure that physical hardship. Obviously the SEALs have the water and the cold, and, we have the cold and the woods and the starvation and the sleep deprivation. There are times during Ranger School, you're cold and wet and starving, just like how I'm sure during Buds, you're cold and wet and starving. And, people are like, oh, what's tougher? I think it all sucks, right? Like, I'm sure, starving in the cold sucks regardless, if you're in the woods or on a beach. It all sucks. You obviously have that kind of like rivalry. Each special operations unit kind of has like its like stereotypes, right? Where the SEALs they look like they all do CrossFit, and they're writing book deals and doing movies. Green Berets, we all look like we're junior varsity football coaches, or we could be some vocational school like teacher, like we teach shop. Rangers are so like gung ho and like tight haircuts and just ready to run through a brick wall and just murder, death, kill, and crush, destroy. I'm a Ranger, and so everyone has kind of like their stereotypes and jokes, but. At the end of the day, like, we love working with one another, at least from my perspective.
How do you talk to your friends and family, or actually your kids, about how to watch media coverage?
I just tell everybody to be very careful on what they see, what's going on in the media. My in-laws love watching Fox News, and I'm like, guys, that's not what, they'll be like, is this true? How could they be doing this to the troops? And I'm like, that's not necessarily true, right? And then I have other family members that will tell me stuff that they see on CNN, and I'm like, that's not true either. Like, we don't really do that. During the global war on terror, and obviously after the raid in Abbottabad and when they killed bin Laden, more people wanted to know about him. More SEAL members, I think, came out and started to talk more openly about what they do in their community. But I think it is important for people to be able to talk about what they did, right? Up to a point. I had the opportunity to work with a SEAL team. I think it was Team 10 that came out to our village stability site that I talked about, where we built the road in 2010. So 7 Green Berets with maybe we had 25 Afghans working as our partner force, like living with us in the compound. We're living in this middle of Afghanistan, right? So they came out to our site. I think it was like 2 Blackhawks full of Navy SEALs. There was like me and one of my teammates. We're standing outside the door to our compound, like all dirty and bearded up and not really in a complete uniform. And we're like, hey, we're over here. Guys, just come walk over here. Everything's fine. Like everything's cool. Just come walk, right? I remember doing the briefing and giving them the kind of like the history of how we got to this point, what the valley used to look like, how, what we were successful with. We finish it, and we're all like shoulder to shoulder in there because there's so many SEALs. And I'm like, hey, so like what's your questions? And it's like quiet for a second, and one of the SEALs is like, where is everybody? And we were like, this is it, man. Like this is it. The SAS has always had a tan beret. I believe the British Navy commandos have a green beret also. The paras in the UK wear a maroon beret. So General Yarborough adopted and just had everybody wear a green beret. President Kennedy at the time in 61 or 62 was down at Fort Bragg visiting. They were doing a demonstration of our capabilities to the president. And the president said, how do you guys like those green berets? And General Yarborough said, we love them. And since then, it's been authorized by the president. We're the only unit that has been authorized by the president of the United States for our traditional headwear, the green beret. As part of the dress uniform, it's not very comfortable wearing a wool beret in Afghanistan. So it doesn't keep the sun out of your eyes, and it doesn't make much sense. So I remember we wore it a couple times in Afghanistan, more for photos. And I just remember thinking to myself, how did guys in Southeast Asia and Vietnam in the jungles wear these things? Because this is so uncomfortable. Once you become a Green Beret and you earn your Green Beret, it's something never given or is earned. You're always part of the regiment. So even now, I've been medically retired since 2016. I still consider myself a part of the Special Forces Regiment. And even now, you can still get your tab and your beret taken away if you do something to dishonor the regiment. Whether you're the captain or the comms guy or the senior engineer, you're an extra hand and you're going to help put together the satellite, or you're an extra hand and you're going to go down there and help rig the demo to blow some of the rock away in the road that we're constructing, or you're there to help inoculate like 90 goats because we're trying to build rapport with the locals. So you're going to stick a syringe up the nose of all these goats, and you're just the guy. You're there to help do the mission. My last deployment to Afghanistan, I was in Kandahar province in Panjwai district, and I got injured in May of 2012. I lost both my legs above the knee when an IED exploded. I remember walking into through a doorway, and immediately I felt myself getting thrown through the air and trying to figure out like what had happened. So what had happened was I stepped on this IED. It was only me that got injured. It immediately kicked off this ambush that the Taliban had set up. So I step on the IED, the machine guns open up, my team fires and maneuvers to get to me. When they get to me, they say I'm rolling around screaming, and my right leg is gone. They said it looks like almost like a exploding cigar you see in a cartoon, but it's just like meat and bone. My left leg was so badly like shattered. They were like, that's f***ed up. Like we're not even gonna worry about that. I remember waking up on the ground, my head ringing, and just totally concussed, trying to figure out like, how did I just end up on the ground? I remember hearing shooting going on. I remember not really being able to see anything and just this cloud of dust and just total chaos. My first thought, for whatever reason, was I just got hit by a car, and it just whatever hit me, my body just was like, whatever just hit you so hard it felt like a car. But right away I'm like, there's no way a car hit me. maybe a mortar landed next to me as I was walking into this compound and exploded. And then I started to hear somebody else yelling and screaming kind of off in the distance. So I thought, all right, I'm on the ground. I felt I couldn't move. I was kind of stuck on the ground, it felt like, but I felt somebody yelling, or I heard someone yelling off in the distance. So I just thought, all right, just kind of sit here and be cool. It sounds like there's a gunfight going on. My teammates are probably in the middle of a gunfight, like engaged in something. They will come find me, especially with this kid over here screaming. And then the next thing I realized, I was back in my body, the best way I could explain it, and it was me screaming, and I felt myself screaming, and I was back in my body. I was just screaming as at the top of my lungs, and I remember hearing one of my teammates over me going, "Holy shit, oh my God, holy shit." And it started to get real chaotic and just, you know, supernatural in a way of what was going on. And then things started to slow down. I wasn't bouncing back and forth as much. And I remember it was getting hard to kind of stay with it. And I remember thinking to myself, this random thought just popped in my head. This picture that I had of my wife and son, it was like a 3x5 photo that was on the wall of my room back at the fire base. And it felt like I was in the photo. And my wife and son were like in the photo, they were like blowing me a kiss. And I was in the photo and it felt like they were reaching out to me. And I just remember saying their names like over and over like a mantra: Peyton and Gina, Gina and Peyton, Peyton and Gina, Gina and Peyton. I just felt that whatever was happening to me, I had no idea, but something bad was happening. I'm going to sit here and stay with it because I got to get back to them. Nothing's going to take me away from them. I'm going to get back to them. Sorry, Gina. Just thinking like the last thing my teammates would be able to tell my wife was that I said I'm sorry for dying. Part of the reason that I'm alive is they put tourniquets all over my body. They couldn't give me any morphine because my breathing and pulse was so weak and shallow that if they gave me anything, my medic was worried if that would just really put me over the edge and they wouldn't be able to wake me up. A medevac came. Apparently that was a whole ordeal and cluster too that they had to work around. Got me on the medevac, get to the Kandahar Trauma Center. I don't remember any of that because I was out. I was somewhere else mentally. They ended up putting 75 units of blood back into me. The human body only holds like 10 to 12. I end up waking up in Landstuhl, Germany 3 days later. One moment I was screaming, chaos, having these visions of my wife and my kid. The next thing I wake up in Germany, so I'm totally confused what's going on. Feels like my 5 senses had been reset. But I felt this kind of female presence next to me, or a doctor next to me at least. And they say, Captain Harrow, do you know where you are? Do you know what happened? And I said, no. And she said, you stepped on an IED. I'm sorry, but you lost both legs above the knee. A major piece of your right arm's missing, but they're going to save your arm. You're just missing 2 fingers on your right hand and 2 legs. And I'm like doing the math, and I'm like, all right, 2 fingers, legs, but I still got my dick, right? My dick is still there. And she's like, yes. And I passed back out. And that's like one of the only memories I have of waking up in Germany. I'm on so many narcotics and pain pills. And also at the time, which I found out later, I had a lot of infection going on. So I was up to like 104, 105 fever. I would wake up, not know where I'm at, wake up, throw up. And like it was kind of like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The first time I talked to Gina on the phone, and she's like, Benny, I love you, how you doing? And I'm like, hey, I lost my legs. And she's like, I know. And I remember saying, I'm gonna run a marathon. And she was just like, all right, Benny, you're gonna run a marathon. Like, all right, it, I don't have legs, but this isn't gonna stop me. Like, whatever it is I gotta do, I'm gonna do. The first 2 weeks, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I was going in for surgery for washouts to wash out the infection from all the dirt blown up into me. Week 3 and 4, I was more conscious. I was more aware of like what was going on. I wasn't going in for surgery as much. This was kind of all closed up. I woke up, and once I started to realize what was going on, all my hands were broken, my fingers were broken. This obviously was all bandaged up. Both my eardrums were blown out. I was on morphine, 2 different types of Oxycontin. Then I'm also on ketamine, different types of like nerve medicine to help like just kill my nervous system and the pain. I would have these bouts of nerve pain where it would feel like my feet getting ripped off of me. And it would be this hot, stinging like sensation of my feet being crushed. And really what it is my lower appendages aren't there. My brain's sending a signal to my where my feet are, but not getting a return signal. I mean, it hurt so bad, I don't want to tell them, and I just wanted them to keep feeding me the ketamine. When I would shut my eyes, I would see like death in his like cloak with his like scythe, like in my room, like either looking over me or I'd see him like sitting in my chair. And so in a moment of clarity, one night they were giving me my cocktail of pain pills, and I said, nah, I don't want them, I'm good. For the next like 3 days, there was nothing I could do except just like breathe it out. So after about like 3-4 days of dealing with all that, I just kind of broke through this like mental plateau, and I didn't need any pain pills, and I didn't need any nerve medication. I actually got out of the hospital at like the 2-month mark from inpatient to outpatient. When I got injured, I was 215 pounds when I stepped on the bomb, but waking up in the hospital, I went from 215 to 135. And I had to totally rebuild myself. I really had to start from scratch, but got myself in shape again and tried to start learning how to walk on prosthetics, on full-size prosthetics like I'm on now. But because so much of my right leg got taken off in the blast, I couldn't wear full-size prosthetics without my right leg falling off. It was just very frustrating, and it felt like nothing was working, right? Like I am mentally ready to go, I'm physically ready to go, but I just don't have the equipment, and I can't get up and walking, and I feel like I'm stuck in this wheelchair, and I'm at a dead end, and I don't know what to do. Everything that I was, this alpha male, athlete, Green Beret, but I'm stuck in a wheelchair, and I can't really carry my son around and like spend Disney with him like I did before. And my wife says, well, it sounds like you just need to like grow bone or like lengthen your limb. And I'm like, yeah, like how do we do this? How do I do that? I just started to do all my own research on bone lengthening, Wolff's Law, and how bone regrows, and osteodistraction, which is the technical term of bone lengthening. I just want to grow my femur a little bit. Can this be done? And they said, yeah, no, obviously we know about this procedure, but we've never done it on an amputee. However, we'll put you in touch with some doctors that have done something similar to amputees. I had to send my x-rays up to the guy up in Minnesota. He introduces himself. He says, Ben, I'm Dr. Dahl. I see your x-rays. I can get you 2 to 3 inches of bone. My femur, which was probably about the same size as my finger here at the time. What he did was he broke it in the middle, drilled a hole up into it at the very distal end to create like a cavity, installed this device that looked like 2 AA batteries on top of one another. And then on either side of the break, he screwed in the device. It was attached to a radio receiver that was buried underneath my skin by my hip. So 4 times a day, I took a radio transmitter, found the receiver that was buried underneath my skin by my hip, put on my stethoscope, pushed the power button, and I would count 9 turns. It was like a reverse vice. So it would kind of like unscrew, and it would lengthen my broken femur. So after about 11 months of lengthening a broken femur, I end up setting 2 medical world records for the shortest stump lengthened on an amputee, and then for the most bone regenerated on a human, because instead of 2 to 3 inches of bone, I end up regrowing about 5.5 inches of bone, and I got myself up and walking. I guess it was about like a 2.5, 3-year process. Because I made myself patient zero and I refused to live life in a wheelchair, this became a procedure that they actually started to do for other guys at the hospital at Walter Reed. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, grew up on Long Island. My summers I spent living with my family down in North Carolina. So I had best of both worlds of learning about sweet tea, but also having enough like city street smarts, like growing up on Long Island. I was a serious lacrosse player in high school. I was getting recruited by top D3 schools and some pretty good D1 schools. I knew two things. I knew, number one, I wanted to continue to play lacrosse in college competitively. I knew I wanted to try and win a national championship. It really just narrowed down to West Point or Annapolis, and I was getting recruited by both programs and loved both schools. I felt at the end of the day that I kind of got the most love from West Point, and they wanted me a little more, I guess. I wanted to play lacrosse at the highest level. It just worked out that going to the military academy and joining the Army was the path that I took. After graduation, I did infantry officer basic course in Ranger School. I was already airborne qualified. We deployed for 15 months from 2006 to 2007 to Iraq, where I was a mechanized infantry platoon leader in Iraq. When I was in Iraq, I actually had the opportunity to work with 3 separate special forces teams. So I always kind of knew about special forces and Green Berets. I focused on like the little victories of it. And that was something I learned going back to like the military training, like small victories, right? Like it was a hard day, it sucked, but guess what? You're gonna have a hot meal. That's a small victory. I remember taking my first steps after I got fitted, post all the bone lengthening, and knowing all right, now I'm able to start. It was like I felt like I literally closed a chapter and I opened up a whole new chapter of, I knew it was going to be challenging of having to figure out and learn how to walk again, but I'm ready to go. I've been waiting 2 years up to this point, so I'm ready to go. It's funny, it's intimidating, everything that I've done in my life, jumping out of planes in combat, but wearing your legs outside in the real world where it's not all even and there's no parallel bars, you're like, whew, this is a little freaky, right? So the legs I'm wearing right now, they have carbon fiber sockets, and then they're basically made out of, aluminum, titanium, and some plastic components. But what it is it's really 2 microprocessors inside the knees. Something crazy like 90 times or 60 times a second, the computer is figuring out where it is, because there's also a gyroscope in there, kind of where it is in time and space. And then also based off of the input on the sensors on the foot of how much weight I'm putting on it, for it to give me either less or more hydraulic resistance, because there are hydraulic pistons in the back. And so because it's a computer system, it gets charged by a battery. The battery can last me really anywhere from 3 to 5 days, depending on how much I'm walking on it. And it takes about 2 to 4 hours to charge it. And the knees themselves, everything, the sockets in the knees are probably about $70,000 a leg. The effort it takes for me to keep my balance, the effort it takes for me for my core strength, the effort it takes for me to engage my knees and to walk, especially on uneven terrain, it's 140% more effort. So if you walk a mile, I'm walking 4 miles. The next time we came down to Disney, I didn't bring my chair. I walked all 3 days, and I remember wearing my heart rate monitor, just my GPS, just to also keep track of how much I was walking. It felt like I was back at selection. At the end of every day, when I would take my legs off, I would have blisters, bloody at times, super sweaty, super uncomfortable, super tired. But every day I did 25,000 steps, and I was able to do it. One of the things that really helped me getting comfortable or being comfortable with discomfort again was skiing and mono skiing. And I never skied growing up. I always played hockey. There's this program called Veiled Veterans where they take people from the hospital that, like myself, that never skied or missing limbs, and they teach them how to do adaptable skiing. I did mono skiing where I basically had to sit in a bucket, and underneath you there's one ski and you have 2 outriggers, and that's how you kind of turn. For the first day, it was all so new to me and intimidating, but once again, I was just all right, I'm gonna swallow my ego and pride and do this and try and figure out what this is, and just being able to like explore the mountain and do the same thing that able-bodied people were doing. And gaining that confidence actually helped me learning how to walk of like, all right, walking around in 2 prosthetic legs is just like skiing. It's balance and transition, and it's just having some confidence and just kind of going with it. Besides skiing, like I said, I was playing sled hockey, which once again was like an event where I had to kind of like swallow my pride. I eventually sucked up my pride, went down to the rink for a practice, and got on the sled, back on the ice, and I was falling over. But there's something about being back on the ice and playing hockey again that I was like, all right, I want to teach myself how to do this. I went and tried out for the US men's national team after they won gold medal in Sochi. I didn't make it. They had 2 goalies at the time that were really good. They weren't looking for another goalie. I was thinking about it. I was like, well, I know I qualify for Italian citizenship because I married an Italian citizen and we live outside of Italy and we've been married for more than 3 years. And I know Italy has a sled hockey team. I ended up going over Italy a couple times for like training and to play in some like international friendlies, and was playing with the Italian national team at the Paralympic level. People stare or kids stare. I get it. They're curious. Kids come up and want to see like what's going on. They can't help themselves and they'll touch my legs. Usually if it's like an adult that tries to touch my leg, I'll slap their hand and be like, what are we doing? Probably never going to end up running a marathon. I've done a couple marathons hand cycling, but honestly, it's not because it's not because I don't want to. It's just I feel like there's no like need to prove to myself. There's other things I've done to prove to myself that sucked. That all right, you did it. You can still do it. Besides being a full-time dad, I am president for an aircraft management company called PAMJets. We're basically the flight department for people that own private jets or businesses that own their own aircraft. And we staff it and take care of the maintenance and help with all the logistics that goes into operating and owning private aircraft. I started a podcast called Team Harrow. I wanted to use my story more as a platform where it's not just solely about me. I wanted to create the ability for other people to come on and share their stories of resilience or just cool and amazing things they've done as an athlete, as a coach, in the military, or even just in the business world. What I did, it was a full contact sport. This is unfortunately part of it. It's like in hockey, going into a corner to fish out a puck, like you're gonna get hit. Eventually things like this happen to either you or your friends. I don't really call, it is funny when people call it like my accident, as if like, which I guess accidentally this happened, but I don't refer to it as my accident. It's my injuries. I got injured. My SF teammates and people, my friends, they just see me like kicking and they're so happy to see that. Obviously they know I have a major obstacle to overcome. But they'll tell you if anybody's going to do it, Ben's going to be able to do it.
Hi, I'm a producer on Authorized account. If you like this episode, then you should check out our new podcast and comment below with the names of people you'd love to hear us interview.